How'd that all grab you? Bob Myers, sayonara.
Yeah, not surprised at the top line of it. Bob Myers saying goodbye. And before Woj had his Woj bomb earlier today, I was pretty certain that that's going to be the way it was going to go based on your reportage from last week or the week before, where you had a sourced report saying that he had the biggest offer in GM history and he didn't sign it. If you give me right now the biggest contract in radio slappy history, I'm signing it, Mark, and I'm signing it immediately. So that told me all I need to know about Bob Myers and where he was in terms of wanting to keep the gig.
I think back to when we talked to him before the year started, and all of a sudden I thought of Buster Posey all over again. And here's what I mean by that. I think sometimes people make a decision well before we realize, like, forget this. Joe Lacob will have us believe he found out 4 hours ago. Okay, that's nice. No, you didn't. Bob Myers, I feel, like Buster did when he left the Giants, probably made this decision at the beginning of the year and then waited to do the whole year to see if anything changed his mind. It's the exact same way that Posey did it. And apparently nothing did.
Yeah.
Apparently nothing changed his mind.
Nothing did. And what he led off the entire press conference with was my big takeaway, which is you can't do it unless you're all in. And he said, I'm not going to do this job unless I'm all in. And he's not all in. And so he respects the job. He loves the team enough to where he's not going to do it. And, you get the 3 young daughters and you've got a chance to do something else. And he mentioned it as a part of his great opening statement where he went to UCLA and then he went to law school at night. He became an agent and he came right into this job. He hasn't done nothing ever. So wouldn't it be nice to have a year, to have the ability to have a year to just step back and do nothing?
Maybe. I'm with him where it's like I think certain people are wired certain ways, and that sounds great to every human, but not every human is good at it. And Bob might be one of those guys. But I tell you what, first of all, we got a very, very big audience today on our YouTube and Twitch feed. So first off, welcome and thank you. Keep the chat coming. We are reading it. We will respond when we can for sure. Get involved in it with you. The Comcast Business text line is there for you. We're checking that out. And the lines are open at 888-957-9570. An hour from now, Mitch Haniger is going to be on the show. But I tell you what, until then and after that, I really think this is a great day and a great time of the day now that it's official and we've heard from everybody involved for you to weigh in on what you think this means. I've heard everything in the build-up to this moment, from this is the end, this is the first brick on the wall and now the wall will fall, to this is an executive, who cares? I've heard everything on both spectrums and everything in between. But I wonder, as you now watch Bob Myers leave and that settles in with all of you Warriors fans, what does this mean? I will quickly state that for me, this is a very, very big deal. This is a very big deal. I'm not saying they can't win. I'm not saying it means Draymond's not going to be on the team anymore. But this is the glue. The glue left. And to think that everything will hold together in the ways that it has in the past, I think is a foolish errand. And so what it looks like, obviously, we don't know yet. I don't know what moves are coming over the next 6 weeks. But Bob Myers, in obvious and non-obvious ways, kept this all together. And I will say that for me, this feels way different than the departure of any sports executive that I can think of, certainly in recent memory. To a degree, the emotion that I felt as a fan today, I'm not going to say it was the same as, for instance, when Bill Walsh started crying because he was going to retire. But it's something on that level to where I go, it's not going to be the same anymore.
No.
I hope y'all get that. It's not going to be the same anymore.
And it might be a short-term change. It certainly will be a long-term change. And the next one up is Draymond Green. So Draymond Green probably knew before even recent days, and Bob said in his press conference that he talked to as many players as he could which tells me Steph, Clay, and Dre for sure, and Andre, and maybe Kavan, and I don't know how deep down the roster, if he called Ty Jerome and, Guy Santos, if he had a face-to-face with every single player.
Guy.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I doubt that, but he certainly let them know. So if you're Draymond Green and you're still deciding, most likely, what you want to do, and you find out definitively that Bob is going to leave, what does that do about your desire to be here? And then you look at Steve Kerr, who's got one more year left, and Steve and Bob have been so close, and Steve has been through everything that Bob's been through in terms of the last 8 or 9 years. And so if Bob is gone, does Steve want to re-up and be here? Because you know that the future beyond the big three, Steph, Clay, and Draymond, is probably a little bit more bleak than it is over the course of the next year or 2 or 3. So at what point do you as a coach want to sign on for whatever comes next?
Well, I will say, and somehow in the buildup to all of this, I missed this on Draymond's podcast. It was about a week ago, and I just found it yesterday. And in watching it, knowing that Bob was going to speak today, not fully knowing what he would say, but thinking again that it was, the writing was on the wall that he was probably going to go. Having the opportunity to go back and listen to what Draymond said a week ago, I was like, oh, I can't believe I missed that a week ago, because if I had seen that, I think a couple of things would have been clearer. One, that Bob was probably going. Draymond, and just to sort of summarize what he said, he addressed the rumors and he goes, look, I don't know if he's leaving or not, but if he does, it really sucks. It really sucks. And then here's all the reasons why. And just in watching his face as he's saying it, you could sort of see that he was resigned to the likelihood that he was going to have to experience Golden State Warriors basketball without Bob Myers. And he wasn't necessarily that thrilled about it. Now, it doesn't mean that he wants to leave, but he ended the whole commentary by saying, I hope he stays, and I hope I do too. That's how he ended it.
Right.
And so you're right that I think one of the basketball thoughts that immediately goes through our heads is, if Bob goes, how does this affect whatever decision Draymond is about to make? And even if Draymond does want to stay, which he says he does, who's there to now conduct however that's going to look and work out?
Yeah, well, Bob is there. And Joe mentioned it.
That's true.
Bob's going to be there until the end of June, which is another, 31 days from today. You got one more day of May, and then you got 30 days of June. So 31 days. You got 4 weeks and 3 days. So come 4 weeks from Friday, it'll be Bob's official final day. And I guess he doesn't have to give 2 weeks because he already gave 4 weeks. And so Joe wants him to stick around between now and then, and the draft is going to happen between now and then. And Draymond will either opt in, get an extension, or both, or opt out between now and then. So there is work left to be done, and I wonder if does Bob sit down with Draymond now and talk about that extension? And I got the feeling, listening to Joe Lacob, the owner, talk about the Joe-Bob relationship, not specifically, but the sense I got, Mark, was that Joe is involved in everything other than what color coffee cup Bob chooses to use.
Did you see what Bob did when Joe said, I'm going to work him right up to the end, June 30th? He doesn't know that. If he doesn't know that, now he knows that. Did you see what Bob did? Now, I don't look.
He said, Joe, how many sick days do I have left?
That man's face went straight to his hands. Now, there was a smile underneath those hands, but we've heard before that Joe Lacob is hard to work for. Most type A billionaires, I feel like they are. But it speaks to the exhaustion that Bob is talking about. Maybe it's not just the job. Maybe it's also the boss. Maybe it's this particular company, as Joe would put it. He kept calling it a company, an organization. Yes, it is all those things. However, I never love hearing that because I feel like there's a discord between ownership and fans when you do that. When you start calling it a business, you start calling it a company. This is how we run our company.
Right.
It's not wrong. You're absolutely okay to say that. It is your company, and you do run it that way. But one thing, I think sports gets in trouble when fans get let behind the curtain too much. We are by definition, fish hook in mouth, we're buying into the whole show. We're buying into this, right? It's not just men in jerseys playing basketball.
Professionals making a paycheck.
It's our team.
These are our guys.
It's our team. They're our guys. We care if they win. We care if they lose.
We might care more than they do.
We take it personally.
Yeah.
It ruins days and weeks and months and years for some people. So when you do that, and it's like, well, we're going to run the organization. We will continue to win. And whatever happens, we're going to bring in someone else. Like, I don't know. If there was one thing I would have said to Joe today, and I bet he'd blow it off because that's what type A billionaires would do.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe a little bit more of a personal touch with what you want to say to Bob. Like, all his list of Bob's things were like...
It was like LinkedIn.
Transactions.
Yeah, completely.
They were transactions.
It was his, like, what reading his LinkedIn.
What do you think about Bob, Joe? What do you think about Bob?
Well, I know how hard it was for Bob to get Andre Iguodala in here, and I know that he was the one who spearheaded Kevin Durant.
Like, what about Bob, to borrow a movie title? What about the guy sitting next to you and all of the things that he does that aren't in the job description? Because that's what you have to replace.
That's what you're going to miss the most. You're going to miss the fact that he's a Draymond whisperer. You're going to miss the fact that he and the head coach, Steve Kerr, have a unique kinship. And he actually said that in one of his opening remarks about the GM and the head coach are not supposed to get along. But Steve Kerr is one of his best friends, and he's going to miss. And that might have been one of the times where he started to get a little bit lower lip quivery and pay the over. Not a full-on cry fest, but I put the over on tears at 1.5 instances, and I believe we had 2 different instances. And one of them was when he was talking about Steve Kerr, his good friend, and the relationship that they have, because they're not supposed to get along. The GM and the head coach are supposed to be at odds because the head coach wants this and the GM says no, and the GM says you're getting this player and the head coach says no. But these two have worked in lockstep, and so that's going to be one of the things. And you want to list all the things you're going to miss about Bob. Number 1 to me is Draymond whisperer, unless Draymond's gone. Number 2 is he and Steve Kerr are in lockstep.
Yep. But don't forget, I think we focus so much on Draymond Green because that relationship is so well traveled, and we have so many stories. I think about who's sitting next to the player every time the player is going through anything. Kevin Durant, Andrew Wiggins, Steph Curry,
Klay Thompson
after the punch,
Klay Thompson after the injury.
It's always Bob. And so my concern for the Warriors is that they will go, oh, we have a GM opening, and we will find someone who will handle the draft, and we will find someone who will handle free agency. Yeah, everybody can find that. It doesn't mean you're going to do a great job, but everybody can find a basketball mind that understands the cap and player development and drafting and the situation and all that. But you can't find Bob. Who's going to go handle the people? Who's handling the people? That's for me, that's the question, and I don't know if there's an answer to it. And even if there is an answer to it, whoever would do that well, it would take an incredible amount of time in order to build those relationships. So quite frankly, like, I wonder if y'all feel the way I do. Irreplaceable. It's totally irreplaceable. And that's why this is a day. It's a day. This is tough. I wonder if Warriors fans, and I can see a lot of you, GM, fine, whatever. Bring in somebody else with a collar who's going to,
Let's find somebody who can actually not squander the pick that resulted in James Wiseman.
Yeah.
I mean, thanks, Bob.
This is so much more.
There's a lot of Bob haters out there.
Well, of course there are.
I'm just saying. It is sports, but I don't think a lot of people understand what you said. You use the P word, Mark, because everything is about the people. And I've worked at this station now for almost 12 years, and I've worked for 4 or 5 different program directors, and every program director has been better or worse about working with the people. And our guy here is having to work with the people because it's the board ops, it's the engineers, it's the on-air talent, it's everybody. And as a leader of any organization, if you aren't good at working with the people, then the people are not going to perform as well as they possibly could or should. And that's where the Steve Kerr, Bob Myers tandem for me has been so good, because Steve is great at the basketball X's and O's, but also working with the people, and to have a GM who also is able to work with the people. Klay Thompson gets hurt in the Toronto series, and he rushes in there, and he only cares about the person there. He's not thinking about, oh, can we patch him up, and what can we do to still win the series? He's in tears because he's a people person, and Draymond Green needs to be checked in the middle of a game, so Bob leaves his seat and goes and checks Draymond Green, and Draymond, oh, thanks, Bob. Thank you for checking me. Are you going to find a GM who has that level of gravitas? No chance.
No. Think about every championship that ever gets won, okay? Sometimes GMs will come in, start hugging players, and you can look at them, and you're almost like, do you guys even know each other? Or are you hugging this person because you have to? Do you actually hate them underneath your core? Because the general manager to player relationship is very unique, team to team. It can be very, very different, and I don't think it's set up for them to be all chummy and interwoven. That's not the way a general manager to player relationship is set up. Think about it, right? The general manager is the one who can cut you, trade you, send you down if this is baseball, right? Like, that's the way that relationship is set up. Remember the movie Moneyball? Right? Here comes Brad Pitt. He's playing Billy's character when he walks through the locker room and everybody's playing music after the loss, gyrating all over the place. He got a bat in his hands. He's like, that's the end of that. I'm the boss. Get the hell out of here. What are you guys doing? Bob figured out a way, and this is, I think, the job. This is the goal of every boss. Bob figured out a way to do both. He figured out a way to be the president and general manager and run basketball ops, but also be completely interwoven, respected, and needed by the players. And so to me, that's why, A, that's irreplaceable, and B, to sort of say that the Warriors, Joe Lacob had that part about continuity. I don't know, what's continuity mean here? Your son or Mike Dunleavy?
That's continuity.
It's not.
No, but it's continuity in terms of they've already been there. And Bob talked about his team a lot. Bob said, we wouldn't have done what we did without our team. And he mentioned Mike, and he mentioned Kirk, and he mentioned a bunch of other names that I can't rattle off because I didn't type them all down because I don't know these people, because Bob was at the front of the organization. But in terms of the team, if you only lose Bob at the top, you still can have some continuity. Now, the continuity lies in whether or not the players can put their faith in either Mike Dunleavy Jr. or Kirk Lacob to be the guy, and they have faith in that person to be the head of the organization. Then continuity can be somewhat in place. It won't be the same because Bob's gone, but that's what Joe was talking about in terms of continuity.
No, I understand that, but there were moments of what Joe said, and I'm not expecting him to do it any differently. What is it he can actually say right now? Bob left. What are you going to do? I understand all that. I really do. But there were, when he said, look, the rules change, the people change, we're going to win. Forget about Bob for a second. How do you think Steph feels when he hears that? And maybe that's not even the point, but does Joe Lacob actually feel that all of these people who have been a part of a dynasty, do you think that you can just be good at your job and replace them and keep going? I don't think it works that way in the NBA.
Do you think that Joe thinks it works that way?
It felt that way.
Yeah, of course it does.
Yeah.
Because Joe Lacob...
Doesn't work that way, though.
Well, it does for Joe Lacob. Because if you know the Joe Lacob story, he did not get born into money. He was a self-made man. He's a guy who didn't have a lot. He worked for his first 1,000, then his first 10,000, his first 100,000, his first million, his first 10 million, all the way up. He's a self-made man. So in his life, if you want to run down his life in terms of wins and losses, his winning percentage is probably close to 100. So in his mind, he doesn't see this as, oh my God, Bob's leaving, I should sell the team. He thinks that they're going to win regardless.
Well, that's obviously that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I understand. It's an amazing story. It's an amazing story.
Right.
This is nothing against what Joe can say in this moment. However, this is a new endeavor, if you will. This is the NBA. You don't have greatness walk out the door and go, we're going to work hard and we'll find new greatness. You can try, but go to all the great organizations. Okay, how'd the Spurs get Wembanyama? Because they stunk out loud. So the idea that if Bob is the first domino, and whether it takes 1, 3, 4 years for the rest of the dominoes to fall.
Oh, they're falling.
Yeah. And
they will fall.
And so to think that in some way you can replace that and snap your fingers and just win every year, you don't do that in the NBA.
You're right, but I don't think that he's thinking it in terms of snap your fingers. I bet you he's thinking already about when Steph Curry leaves, how they can still be a winning organization. And a winning organization doesn't mean you're a champion every year, because we know that's an impossibility. But the Warriors this year were one of 8 teams remaining. I'm sure from an organizational standpoint, that felt like a win. Now, it's not a championship win, but it's not a lost year. So if Joe Lacob is thinking about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if you could be one of the last 8 teams each and every year, that would probably feel like a success.
That'd be amazing.
Even though you wouldn't be a champion, and I know that's where the bar is set if you're Joe Lacob, you still want to make money, you want to be relevant, you want to be competitive, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, no, listen, I get that. I wouldn't want an owner of a team for which I rooted to ever approach it any other way. All I can do is tell you how I feel today. And I feel like Bob Myers leaving is a really, really big deal. And I feel like the players that you all feel are the greatest players in the history of this organization agree with me. That's what I feel. I think Steph, Clay, and Dre think this is a really crappy day. That's what I think.
Well, I think they knew that this was coming.
That's fine.
Probably a lot longer than we did.
Yeah.
And to me, the really telling one is Draymond, because Draymond Green has a decision to make, and maybe he's already made it and we don't know about it. And then Klay Thompson is entering a contract year, and he's got a decision to make. And I wonder if the new GM, or if it's Bob who tries to shoehorn in a deal for Klay before he leaves. But Draymond and Klay are the ones I really am wondering about.
Yeah, the Draymond thing's so interesting because it sort of feels like both sides have already made up their minds, and it's just a matter of figuring out numbers, figuring out the math. I actually very much still think Draymond is going to stay. I think Draymond wants to stay. I think the organization wants him to stay. The other side of using the word continuity, I immediately started thinking of all the parts of the organization that are not Bob. And to me, that was Joe Lacob saying the exact same thing that Steve Kerr has said. You want continuity? Sure. Then that means Steph, Clay, and Draymond are going to continue to be central figures with regard to the roster going forward.
And Kevon, Andrew, and Jordan.
Absolutely.
And Jonathan.
And
Dante.
Not everybody.
And Yee. Well, it's funny where you want to draw the line on continuity.
Absolutely. I want to draw the line on continuity, meaning the people who've been here for a decade, not necessarily the people who have been a piece of this for 2 years. I mean, there's always change.
So Kevon's gone, is what you're saying.
He's been here a lot longer than 2 years.
Not a decade.
Not a decade.
Okay.